weeks, Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Patrick Bwama, is warning that the current stalemate in Parliament could cripple the economy and affect Ghana's program with the IMF. It follows the Speaker of Parliament's decision to adjourn the House indefinitely as a result of a Supreme Court ruling temporarily halting his decision to declare 4 seats vacant. Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Patrick Bwama, has been speaking to Joy Business. Take a listen.
What are some of those key legislations that should have been passed in the House over last week and even this week and even going forward, that these current uncertainties could delay these regulations as well, that could have an impact even on us going to the board for our third review?
First of all, I mentioned the Ghana Investment Promotion Center bill, where the center is seeking to become an authority, to be able to have some dedicated funds outside what was in the center's mandate, where they are asking for some clear budget lines to be budgetary allocations to be made. Secondly, they are asking for some fees and charges to be levied on some companies, which I believe definitely will find its way or expression in the Fees and Charges and Miscellaneous Act, Parliament. Secondly, I also mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency bill, which is going through the consideration stage, where the Minister, Ophelia Mensah-Hayford, the MP from Fansman, has been very active on, with Dr. Marfo, the chair of the Environment Committee. Thirdly, some reforms in some regulations needs to be looked at, especially in the Public Financial Management Act and some legislations or regulations that came with it. You also know that we have a loan agreement for the Financial Sector Stabilization Fund, which my committee looked at. A report was presented, but there was some disagreement on whether a fund properly so called with a body that to administer it, or it's just a fund to be managed through the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. That's my view. Those are the kind of issues that are pending. It's a 250 million World Bank facility to help stabilize the financial sector, which went through serious turmoil during the COVID period.
Well, Chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee, Patrick Bwama, joining me in studio is Parliamentary Affairs Correspondent Kweku Asante with more on this one. So he talks about the implications on the economy and the IMF program. What's at stake?
Well, I think he couldn't have hit the nail on that head, because if you look at the EPA bill, it is part of the conditionalities of the current IMF deal that government is seeking to get. There's also the matter of about $350 million worth of tax waivers. We should know that these are really unprecedented times in the life of Parliament. At the end of this year, almost everything that is before Parliament, if it is not transacted, will expire. So if these bills, if this $350 million worth of tax waivers, there's a $250 million worth of loan, the IDA facility for the Ghana Financial Stability Project.
Right.
If all of these are not dealt with before the midnight of 7 January 2025, all of them go down the drain and they get to start afresh. And that is why the government side is ramping up the pressure on the Speaker of Parliament to recall the House to get these things done. There are matters having to do with illegal mining, and all these really come back.
We tried to catalog a few of them. So approval of the budget for the first quarter of 2025, the LI revoking mining.
We literally could risk a government shutdown if you go to election. Ordinarily, the thing about the budget is not such a big deal, because after election, they can come back. But what if there's a runoff in the election, which means that MPs are all over the place again campaigning for their respective presidential candidates for that 28th December election, and then you are just zooming right into January, and then you don't have a budget from 1st January. So that is very crucial. There's also the $250 million Ghana Financial Stability Fund project that I spoke about. Government needs that. If government gets $250 million between now and December, we can see some changes with the Ghana cedi and its stability. Fortunately for government, this $250 million Ghana energy sector loan has now been passed by Parliament prior to all this political brouhaha. And so that is off the table for now. So these are some of the key issues.
Tax waivers.
$350 million worth of tax waivers. All these companies who've had tax waivers sitting on the tables of Parliament for the last 4 years. I'm sure some of them are tired, some of them have given up, and they need it. Some of them, it is contingent on approving this first before they mobilize and come into the country to come and do this one district, one factory. And all these persons, there's also the 2 Supreme Court nominees. So there's a lot at stake in Parliament, and that is why the government side is getting the
But we are seeing the MPP caucus try to push to get the House to reconvene. Where are we at?
Well, they have sent that memo to the Speaker. The Speaker has between yesterday and next week, Tuesday, that will be 7 days, for him to respond. And then, when it comes to this matter, he's not giving any room of any latitude on that. It's a shall. And so he will have to reconvene Parliament after 7 days. But the big question is, after the 7 days, if he agrees to recall Parliament, when is he going to do so? Is he going to do so in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks? Because there's a matter having to do with whether or not, if the matter is an emergency, Parliament has to reconvene right after that 7 days. But the Speaker of Parliament is the one who makes the determination as whether or not these things are emergency or not. And so if he decides that because of this political crisis, I'm going to recall Parliament in the middle of November, at the end of November, does government have that room to wait for that long? And that is why this is so crucial. Also, Chairman Sabonsu, speaking with Evans Mensah in a yet to be air PM Express interview, is calling for dialogue. He's asking eminent Ghanaians, he himself says he's going to chip in and try and speak to the Speaker. Because at this point, that is the only way you can get the Speaker to back down on entrenched positions all the persons around the table are taking.
And this morning, we had reportage that the NDC, Roxanne Dofia, is also trying to get the Supreme Court to interpret that aspect of the Constitution that calls on the Speaker to, I mean, if there's a, was it 15%
of MPs, if they recall the House for an emergency sitting. And he says he wants to go to the Supreme Court. Although that is clear and sharp.
He hasn't gone yet?
Yes, he hasn't filed that application yet. But it tells you that there's a lot of politics ongoing around this scenario. A lot of people taking actions to further their own causes. And that is why dialogue is necessary. If he files this and the Speaker of Parliament will say, okay, listen, let's wait until the Supreme Court determines that matter. That could literally be the end of the 8th Parliament, because some of these matters could take so long for the Supreme Court to determine. So high stakes, and both sides really need to drop down their entrenched positions, because the economy...
And you mentioned there's a lot of politics at play, but we also have to prioritize national interest. Yes. So how far do you think these politicians will go? At what point would they say, okay, let's stop with the politics? We have to...
Well, at this point, I don't think anybody is willing to let their stance go, because the 7th December election is barely 45 days away. And politicians are looking at the things they will do that will inure to them and their benefit. They're looking at things that will energize their base. People won't necessarily go to the ballot and vote for NDC MPP because of this political stalemate. But they are energizing their own bases on both sides. And that is why it is important for cool health to prevail. People need to drop down their entrenched positions they've taken direct.
The political circus continues.